the third part of today's session is on the RESTful API. So what happens is we want our mobile app to be able to access the internet services. Like for example, if you take a bus, you may want to see the bus arrival timing. You do not have the bus arrival timing stored on your smartphone. So all the service, all the data are stored on a separate server. So in order to access that data in the server, you need to use a web service. And most of the time we use REST API. Another example is this Grab. So for example, if you want to create a Grab app to hire a Grab car, so the same thing is you do not have the car's information on your handphone. You need to access the Grabs or the web service in order to get the data of the Grab car that you want to hire. Okay, so essentially we are going to talk about how using this REST API on what exactly is a web service first thing, and some basic intro on the HTTP protocol, some of the URL requests, the HTTP verbs and so on, and how it's actually loaded in the iOS and so on. And basically we try to do a async network call. So this part I think some of you have covered before in your WSD. So I'll just quickly go through it. So just like any normal website or URL, usually you have the web URL broken out into separate portions. So the first part or the domain is called the hosts. So this is the address or the where the server actually hosts or the information is stored. Path over here, the /2.2 or /questions. So this path represents the different endpoints where you actually query the server. Okay, for example, in this case, this path may be actually querying the server for a list of questions. The 2.2 could be a version number. And finally, the part on the right after the question mark is the query. So what are the things that you actually want to query the server for? So besides question, you may want to query in the form of descending order, and also with the end. Okay, what are the sites that you want to query? For example, Stack Overflow. So this is how a typical REST API endpoint actually you can query on any web services or web client and so on. So each HTTP request contains a HTTP method. In this case, this is the HTTP method, the GET method, and the URL to query, the URL to the server resource. So in this case, this is the URL, host example.com. Some parameters to the server, HTTP header. This and the data itself is optional. So that means you may or may not need to specify the parameters or send any data to the server. But the minimum you need to specify in any HTTP request is the method. Usually it's a get or post, and also the URL that you want to query, which is this URL over here. So after you query, the server will reply you with a response. So the HTTP response typically will contain a HTTP status code. So in this case, 200 stands for OK. There are other HTTP status codes which may represent different statuses. So you can actually query them. For example, you can search for HTTP status codes. For example, if you Google it, then you should be able to see a bunch of different HTTP status codes. So you can actually check, for example, on Wikipedia, 200 or 2 something usually is a positive response. That means the response are considered okay. For all the other responses, it depends on the which part of the request it breaks down. Okay, so for example, yes. So for example, if you look at this Wikipedia here, for example, if you encounter any 2 series HTTP response, 200 is okay. That means everything is fine. You get the data you want. Server responded to you. Or 202 is accepted is okay, but that means the server is still processing your request, haven't replied yet. Other not so good reply is sometimes you may get 3 series. 3 series represents the data has been redirected to another server, either temporarily or permanently. The 4 series will be the error that you normally do not want to see, which is, for example, the most few common ones, 404, HTTP 404 not found. That means the server is offline, is not available. Or sometimes forbidden 403. So for example, in the ITE network, if you try to access a server outside that is related to, for example, hacking, related to Bitcoin, then the IT may respond with a HTTP 403 forbidden because the firewall will block it. Okay, so these are some of the common HTTP codes. 500 series means the server has internal server error, so there's something wrong with the server and so on. So all these errors are part of the status that you will get from the HTTP response. So this is the status code. HTTP header specifying some extra information. So depending on your request, you may have other responses that you may or may not want to use. For example, the encoding type UTF-8. What is the content? Basically, this is a HTML file. How long is the content? 138 bytes. And what is the server? It's based on Apache web server, on Unix, Red Hat, and so on. So these are the typical things that you will get from the HTTP response. And of course, the data, if you are asking for data. So most of the data that is responded from the server comes in this form called the JavaScript Object Notation, or JSON. So it's essentially a lightweight data format. Okay. Older web services, for example, in the old Windows server, you might be getting the data in the form of a SOAP format. So this is a Microsoft proprietary format, which is based on XML. So these are usually not so common nowadays because JSON is the more popular format. Is easier to read, and it is smaller in size compared to SOAP XML. Okay. For all the other data, non-text data like images or videos, usually we receive them in binary form. Okay, binary data. Okay, so the web service that we are going to use is called openweathermap.org. So you can actually go over there and take a look. Openweathermap.org. So let's try to open up this website. Okay, let me paste this on the chat. Yes. Openweathermap.org. Okay, the link is on the meeting chat. Okay, we're going to use this website to query some weather information for our app now. So you can actually create a free account. If you don't have a account, you can create a free account. The free account allows you to query the weather information for certain period. That's all. So not very frequent, but as long as you query not more than, I think, 500 times per day, it should be sufficient. Okay, they allow you to use it up to a certain amount of free format. So let's sign in. If you don't have an account, you can actually create a new account. Okay, if you don't have an account, you can create a new account here, and that's all. That's all you need to do. I think most of you are 16 years and above, should be okay lah. And yeah, so if you don't want to get spam mail from them, you just don't take all this lah. Just ignore it. Okay, I think most of it is quite straightforward. You don't need a credit card. You just need an email and specify your password. That's all. Okay, so let me sign in to my account. Okay, so this is what I'll see after I sign in. If you want to look for bus arrival timing, you can try and search the data.gov.sg, which is over here. Data.gov.sg. Oh no, sorry. Not data.gov. This is the Singapore data. You can actually search for different data, like for example, birth rate. Okay, so Singapore got declining birth rate, so you can actually search for all this data over here. But this is the CSV data. So for example, if you want to search for the bus arrival timing, you can search for my transport.sg, I think. This is the LTA website for the data sets. So it depends on what data set you will be given in your WSS assess tests. So you can be given either a static data sets, like for example, static means all the data that is fixed, not changing, like number of buses, number of cars, distribution of cars or motorcycle and all those things. So these are fixed data. Alternatively, you can also be asked to access dynamic data sets. So dynamic means it's a real time, keep changing. For example, bus arrival timing. So these are dynamic data sets that change every second. So usually they will return you the data in these two formats. Either is XML format or a JSON format. Okay, so if you click and they will show you example of the data format that you may see inside the JSON file, so you can actually take a look at the sample data. This is not the real-time data. So the format of the sample data looks something like this. So this is the format of the data. I don't know whether you can see it. So this is the format of the data. So this is an example of a JSON file, JavaScript notation. So this is the JSON file. So you can see bus service number, operator, SMRT. So everything will be all arranged nicely in this curly bracket format. Okay, so this is JSON, and each data is accessible by its respective key. This is called the key. This is called the data. Okay, so usually we'll query the key in order to get the data. Okay, so this is how LTA actually throw out the bus arrival timing in this format. The other format which we see just now is called the XML. So XML format looks like this. XML format looks like this. This is the XML format. Okay, so this is how XML looks like. Compare this one to this one. Obviously, the JSON file is neater and more elegant. Okay, so the same data, okay, it's the same data. This is on JSON, this is on XML. Okay, so that's why nowadays people don't use XML for web services because JSON is much neater and smaller in file size. Okay, so that is the reason why JSON is the particular format. So for dynamic data like a bus arrival timing, usually you need to request for API access. So you can actually ask LTA to give you permission to access the data. So yeah, I mean, government is like that. You have to ask for permission, why you want to use it for what, where are you from, that kind of thing. So you need to declare all these things. Okay, and of course, further information, you can read the API document and they will show you how to access the web service on the LTA server. Okay, so you can go and read it. It's a very long document. Okay, so basically, yeah, so this is how you can read it on your own website. Oh, they even give you some example code. Okay, so this is example on Swift. Python 2.7. So this is a Python way of querying the data. You need to have an account key and so on. So usually this kind of authentication requires you to specify an account key, which they'll give you only when you successfully submit your requests. Okay, so this is account key. So for our case, for the weather information, we also have our own API key. So after I sign in already, you can look for the API key here. So this is the API key. Okay, please don't sell my key or use it. Otherwise, you'll charge to my credit card. Okay, so this is the API key. So later on, you will use this API key to try to access your weather query from this openweathermap.org website, from server, sorry. Okay, so you can generate your own key. All you need to do is just type in a key name. For example, you want to call Neymar. Okay, Neymar key. Then after that, generate, you get a new key. So this key, you can use it to query inside your Swift app or your Python app or whatever app website that you want to query. Okay, so this is the key that we are going to use in our example here. Okay, so once you created the account, you get the key already. Next, we will be able to explore the kind of API that we want to call. So for this case of openweathermap.org, you can actually search for the API. So they'll tell you how to query the server. So for this case, the ITE, the free accounts that we can use are only for the this. Okay, because we are using it, the free account, the free tier, we are not paying using our credit card or whatever. So that means all the other, for example, the data like subscribe, right? We cannot we can use. So it depends on the description here lah. So included in free subscription, yes, you can use it. So for example, this current weather data, so let's say you want to see how the data can query, you can actually click on the API doc. So in this case, this is how the API document query for this openweathermap.org. So this is how you query. So in this case, you call the server. This is the server endpoint 2.5 weather, followed by the query, city name, and the app ID, which is your API key. So you can actually copy this one. Let's see. Copy. Then after that, let me just paste it somewhere. Okay, so this is my API endpoint. Then city name, it depends on what city name we have. So we can define our city name later, but we need the API key. So let's, we need to get the API key again. I forgot to copy just now. So let's say I use my new API key and I copy and I go back to the website here and I'm going to replace it with the API key. So this is my API key. And let's say the city name in this case is Singapore, right? So we just call it SG, let's say. So this is the query that we want to query for. So let's try. I don't know whether we can work or not. Let's try. So let's try. So okay, like maybe I resign. So instead of Singapore, I use the safer one. Call it London/UK. Okay, so this one is the one that will work. So let me just query this one on the browser. So I'll just paste the query that I added just now. So this is the query. This is the query for London, UK. And the app ID represents the API key that I have just created just now. So let's see whether it works. Invalid API key. Oh, no. What did I do? Let's check again. API key D97 correctly. Invalid API key. Okay, let me try another one. Maybe I use this one instead. So I'll replace the API key with the ID I just created. Okay. So now you should be able to see the weather information. Okay, it's a little bit broken here. So maybe I use Postman, easier to see. Here, never mind. No response. Okay, let me just sign in and see. Okay, so let's say I have this. Oops, this is not the query. So let me get this query. Query get. Let's try. Okay. So this is the response. After I key my location, I should be able to get this. The response from the openweathermap.org is this. So I get the location of the city. In this case, I'm using UK, London as an example. And current weather in London for now is cloudy, broken clouds. And temperature is 289 Fahrenheit. Max mean temperature, pressure, humidity, 85%, blah, blah, blah. So these are the information that I can get from this weather website over here. Okay, so yeah, so this is how we can query on the openweathermap.org. So now let's say, okay, for example, I want to change it to Singapore. I think the case of Singapore is I need to change this query to Singapore, SG, I think. Let's try. Okay. So Singapore weather, I don't know June or not. You all need to look out the window because my room now no window. I don't know whether is it correct or not. So according to them, they say the Singapore weather now is broken cloud and temperature is 300 Fahrenheit, humidity 70%. June or not? I also don't know. Cloudy, 75% cloudy. And sunset is going to be this timing. Okay, so yeah, maybe you can check. Is it broken clouds now? I also don't know. So this is how you can query the Singapore weather, and remember to add the API key at the back. So these are the links where I got the content earlier on from the Adobe XD, the video, the files, the Cocoapods, web services, all over here. This is one very nice article on the OAuth 2 authentication on Swift. So you can actually go and take a look.